What goes up must come down, the law of gravity. Millions of Nigerians are hoping that the law of gravity will soon apply to the rising inflation rate. Meanwhile, the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, has released the latest report on inflation, 31.7% per annum. And tonight, our focus is on what do the latest inflation numbers mean for citizens and business owners. Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is here to share insights on this. Hello, Babajide. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.
Hello. The pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is always mine.
The Bureau of Statistics inflation report shows that the prices of goods across Nigeria have risen by 31.7% now relative to what it was when we talk about a year ago. How significant is this?
It is significant. I would like to explain the significance in 3 points, 3 cosmic points of very urgent areas that we should talk about. The first is approximately a third of a century ago, on this day in 1992, Apartheid ended in South Africa. What is probably most likely known as racial segregation came to an end on this day in South Africa in 1992. Now, why do I refer to racial segregation? In Nigeria, inflation is actually apartheid in disguise, and I'll explain. Inflation at 31.7% is the equivalent of income segregation, just as South Africa had racial segregation. So right now, what is going on in Nigeria is income segregation, apartheid in disguise. That is the first of 3 points which we need to have in our minds. The second point, Anne, is that the last time inflation was as high as 31.7% in Nigeria was back in April 1996. But Nigeria of April 1996 is different from today's Nigeria. In April 1996, when we had inflation this high, the country then only had 112 million mouths. Now, between April 1996 to date, we've had the population growing by 100 million people. In simple terms, Anne, we have a population today where approximately half of them have never lived in a country where inflation has surpassed 30%. And so we're going to likely see a lot of rational and, yes, irrational behavior. It will be extremely hard for economists to model what the future of Nigeria currently will be because, like I said, half of those that are living in Nigeria currently have never experienced a Nigeria where inflation has been this high. So we'll likely see a lot of irrational consumer behavior. Well, the third and perhaps one of the most important points is that if we look back to April 2019, exactly April the 18th, it was a Thursday, April 18, 2019, was an extremely good day for Nigerian workers. That was the day President Buhari signed the minimum wage bill, April 18, 2019. If you carefully study the inflation report between April 2019 to date, inflation has crossed 140%. In simple terms, there is no more such a thing called minimum wage. Once inflation crosses the 100% mark, then workers no longer have a minimum wage. And from April 18, 2019, when the Minimum Wage Act bill was signed, till today, inflation, combined inflation, cumulative inflation, 140%. What I'm saying, Anne, is for that worker that is still earning a minimum wage, is technically working for free. Is not working for a minimum wage, if you look at it relative to 2019. So those are the core 3 points. Well, and beyond these 3 points, what the inflation report also allows us to see now is that, yes, it's an inflation rate report, but it is also standing as a barometer to measure anger. So I'd like us to take a look at the food inflation, especially looking at it from the geopolitical zones. What exactly is the state of inflation across the 6 geopolitical zones relative to what it was last year? Because it then will allow us to see which regions perhaps, which regions are families really getting angry. Looking at the data and the food basket from the National Bureau of Statistics, they say that if we analyze the numbers, the South-South region, 40.7% annual food inflation in terms of price change between what it was this time last year. Southeast, 40.4%, the Southwest, 40%, and across the North, we see a slightly sub 40% inflation rate. In summary, inflation, especially food inflation, is biting families living in southern Nigeria significantly more than it's biting families living in northern Nigeria.
But Babajide, I mean, economists have already given different reasons about the cause of Nigeria's inflation situation. Is there anything that stands out for you?
There are several things that economists are getting right and are getting wrong. Yes, the fuel price, the exchange rates, the population growth rate. But because of time, there's one that I want us to quickly focus on. And if you can pull that up, let's look at Nigeria's money supply over the last 5 years, because it then allows us to see the role money supply is playing in how prices have changed. Let's focus on January 2019 to 2020. You see, as of January 2019, money supply 33 trillion naira. It grew by 1% in 2020 to 34 trillion naira. January 2021, 38 trillion. January 2022, 45 trillion. January 2023, 53 trillion. In all these years, what you see is that the annual growth of money supply has been below 20% year on year. But let's focus on what has happened between January 2023 to January 2024. Money supply has grown from 53 trillion naira to 93 trillion naira, a growth of 76%. That is one major reason why we are where we are today. There is so much money chasing very few goods. Again, I repeat, never in our recent history have we seen money supply grow by as much as 76%. Prior to now, looking at all the previous 5 years and looking at it accurately from January of each year, we've seen that the growth in money supply has been sub 20%. However, in the last 12 months, money supply has significantly grown.
All right,
and
but
that is
because
one of the
we have
reasons
limited...
why inflation currently is at a 28-year high.
All right, Babajide, just in 30 seconds, please. How much is insecurity affecting the ease of doing business and in farming, and how is it affecting food supply in the country?
With insecurity and food, quickly, there's some good news and bad news. Despite the challenges that we are seeing that the armed forces are having in Delta State, we see them take a position on what they will do to manage the food situation. If you can quickly take a look at some of the statements made by the military with regards to how important food is and their role on managing this, we clearly see that they've clearly taken the position that hunger clearly is as dangerous, perhaps even the most dangerous nuclear weapon. That is the statement. Hunger is the most dangerous of all nuclear weapons. And the leaders of the armed forces are saying they are doing all they can to make sure that farmers produce what they need to produce. So that's coming, and that's some good news. However, Anne, the bad news is that if we take a look at Nigeria's population and agricultural production figures, it allows you to see that the challenges we face go beyond insecurity. What I mean is that in 1990, our population was 100 million people, 100 million. You might just want to write that down. 1990, 100. As at 2020, it was 200 million. And so what we've seen is that in 30 years, we've had an additional 100 million mouths to feed. The question is, has agricultural productivity per hectare improved?
Okay.
And I've gone to the national libraries and I've studied a lot of agricultural research, and the summary is Nigeria's population is growing exponentially, yet our agricultural productivity per hectare isn't significantly improving.
Okay,
and so in simple terms, even if the nation were as calm as the skies, as long as agricultural productivity does not improve, and it hasn't been improving even before insecurity. 1990 to 2000, agricultural productivity per hectare wasn't improving. So we need to realize that insecurity is only the fall guy.
All right, thank you very much.
Our problems go beyond insecurity.
Thanks a lot. That's a good place to end. Babajide Ogunsol, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst from our studios in Abuja. Thanks a lot for your time on the news at 10.